Neighbours, but not friends. Slovakia's voters go to the polls this weekend for the 5th time since it became Europe's newest nation in 1993. It's only a modest milestone, to be sure, but for its southern neighbour Hungary, which recently held elections of its own, the political flavour of Slovakia's next government is a matter of some significance. Relations between the two countries have become increasingly tense in the past few years. Slovakia has a sizable ethnic Hungarian community, and grievances about perceived discrimination at the hands of the authorities have been growing. Add to that a controversial recent decision from Budapest to offer citizenship to Hungarians living abroad, as well as the increasing influence of far-right nationalists in both countries, and you have a volatile, some say dangerous, mix.
Nevertheless, in a year of elections in Hungary and Slovakia, similar ill feelings are now generating anxiety about relations between two neighbouring European Union states. Modern-day tensions date back to the end of the First World War, when the victorious Allies dismembered the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. Hungarian communities were left isolated in Romania, Serbia, Slovenia and the Ukraine. Most of what has become southern Slovakia used to be in Hungary, and today around 10% of Slovakia's population is ethnically Hungarian. That's more than 500,000 people, concentrated in one border region. Over the past few years, friction between the two communities in the area has increased, and according to many Hungarians, this has led to increasing abuse and discrimination. On the 1st of November 2008, this ramshackle stadium in Dunajská Streda, southern Slovakia, saw a violent explosion of anti-Hungarian sentiment. But eyewitnesses allege it came from the police.
Olyan szerencsés helyzetben voltam, hogy én itt a pályaszélén állhattam újságírós, fotósként, és hát néztem a meccset, mert senki nem számított arra, hogy ilyen hirtelen lesz. Tehát nem volt nyoma annak, hogy itt bármi hasonló jellegű probléma előfordulhat.
A football team called DAC 1904, supported mostly by ethnic Hungarians, was at home to Slovan Bratislava, from the Slovakian capital, just 50 kilometers away. Zaba Zibula was filming the game for the local television station. Even before kick-off, he noticed trouble brewing outside the ground.
Most, hogyha szétbontjuk a magyar szurkolótábor, aki magyar nyelven igyekezett szurkolni a DAC csapatnak, tehát a Dunaszerdahegy csapatának, ők nagyon fegyelmezetten viselkedtek, a szlovan szurkolótábora viszont elég, tehát rendőrséggel is összetűzött több helyen útközben, és házakhoz dobáltak be görög tüzeket, tehát gyakorlatilag udvarokat gyújtottak szinte fel.
There appeared to be trouble in the stand holding the Slovakian fans, but 17 minutes into the game, police entered the ground and confronted DAC's largely Hungarian supporters. The police would later claim that fans were throwing stones at them, a charge the DAC supporters strongly deny.
A probléma az volt, hogy az ilyet szurkolók, akik nem tudták, hogy mi történt, mentették a bőrüket, próbáltak menekülni. De hát lehet látni, hogy ott korlátok vannak, egy szűk kis kapu van, és ha megindult a rendőrség, akkor nem tudtak más csinálni, mint leugráltak, vagy akik az emberek, a hátsóbbak megpróbáltak leugrálni, magukkal rántva másokat, valakik leestek. Tehát egyszerűen a földön landolt annyi ember, és óriási számú sérült volt a szurkolók között, akik ilyen módon valahogy megsérültek, vagy agyonütötték magukat sebesre, vagy eltört valamiük.
As many as 60 fans were injured. Locals said the police picked on them for not being Slovakian.
Nem magyarul beszéltek, és mondták, hogy most megmutatjuk nektek magyaroknak, hogy nem fogtok itt ugrálni Szlovákiában.
To many Slovakian Hungarians, the violence was simply another in a long series of provocations dating back to World War I. But others think the situation has recently deteriorated.
Things really got worse since the 2006 elections, because the ruling party that won the elections chose to get into the governing coalition, two parties that have a long history of anti-Hungarian and anti-minority agenda.
In Slovakia's last elections 4 years ago, Smer, the Social Democratic Party led by Robert Fico, won a majority, but formed a coalition that included the ultra-nationalist Slovak National Party. Its leader, Jan Slota, is known for his extreme anti-Hungarian views. Slota is on the record as calling Hungarians a cancer in the body of the Slovak nation that should be removed without delay. He has even called publicly for tanks to be sent to flatten Budapest. Unlikely though that may be, Slotter's rhetoric has resonated with some sections of Slovakian society. With the economy struggling and unemployment at more than 12%, minorities have made an easy target. But Slotter's influence isn't just restricted to sloganizing. He's widely credited as being responsible for controversial changes to Slovakia's language law in September 2009. Changes that many ethnic Hungarians feel are aimed squarely at them.
The language law is, I think, it's an outrageous and unprecedented piece of legislation, which leads to very absurd situations.
The law said that Slovakian must be used at all times in health and social services, except where a minority group makes up more than 20% of the local population. All public announcements and signs must be first and foremost in Slovak. All cultural events must have a Slovak language introduction, and minority language schools must run their administration in both languages, with priority given to Slovak.
Imagine that a Hungarian walks up to a ticket counter in Bratislava, in Pozsony, and asks for a ticket in Hungarian. I mean, let's say the clerk is also Hungarian. They speak Hungarian. And believe it or not, by this, they break the language law. And the train company can be fined up to 5,000 euros. There is actually a language police whose mission is to investigate these criminal acts.
Azért, mert a törvény valójában azért készült, hogy megfélemlítse a szlovákiai magyarokat. Ez a legnagyobb tragédiája a nyelvtörvénynek.
Norbert Molnar edits Slovakia's only daily Hungarian newspaper.
Felhívtuk a szlovák postát, hogyha egy magyar ember elmegy a postára itt Pozsonyban és el akarja intézni az ügyeit magyarul, akkor ezt megteheti-e? Erre a válasz az volt, hogy nem. Aztán megkérdeztük, hogy angolul mindezt megteheti-e? A válasz pedig az volt, hogy persze, ha a postás kisasszony beszél angolul, akkor megteheti.
Kalman Petos, Program Director of the Forum Minority Institute in Samorin, Slovakia, has studied the language law and its effects on minorities in the country.
The language law is one additional element to stir up emotions between Slovakia and Hungary, because this is something which the Hungarian side perceives as a further attack on the identity of Hungarians. The Slovak government perceives the Slovak-Hungarian bilateral relationship, first of all, through the prism of security, as if this was a real question, as if in the 21st century there was a real danger for Slovakia from its southern borders.
However, it's not the first time language has been controversial in Slovakia. In 2006, student Hedviga Malina claimed she had been beaten up for speaking Hungarian in public. Her alleged attacker scrawled, "Slovakia free of parasites" on her clothes. Just 17 days after the alleged attack, the police closed the case. Prime Minister Fico then publicly accused Malina of inflicting the injuries on herself. She was charged with perjury. But the scandal refused to go away. Eventually, the police investigation was found to be seriously flawed, and they were forced to admit Malina probably had been beaten up. 4 years on, her attackers still haven't been found. Kalman Petos sees a clear pattern of discrimination against Hungarians, and indeed other minority peoples such as Roma.
In almost all Central and Eastern European countries is the lack or the absence of the intercultural education. But in Slovakia, which is really a multi-ethnic state, there is a large Hungarian minority, there is a large Roma minority. You simply cannot create a positive atmosphere and the social cohesion unless you simply attribute much more attention to the intercultural education. The Slovak children, the Slovak pupils and students learn almost nothing, so close to nothing, about the other national minorities or other ethnic groups.
Komano sits on the banks of the Danube, looking across to neighbouring Hungary. It has a quiet, untroubled feel to it, but on the 21st of August 2009, it became another flashpoint for deteriorating Slovak-Hungarian relations. A committee from the town had invited Hungarian President Laszlo Solyon across the border to unveil a new statue of King Stephen, the first Christian king of Hungary. The invitation led to days of heightened tension between the two countries.
Solyon László látogatása valójában a szlovák-magyar közös hisztérikus kapcsolatoknak a kicsúcsosodása volt.
the Slovakian government intervened, saying they couldn't guarantee his safety and that the event was a provocation designed to stir up anti-Slovak feeling. Having made a point about Slovakia's apparent intolerance, President Solom turned back at the border, to the disappointment of 4,000 people waiting for him in Kamano. But the banning of the leader of one EU state from entering another was seen by some as a serious breach in diplomatic relations. Back in Hungary, the Slovak ambassador was called in to explain his country's action. Molotov cocktails were thrown at the Slovak embassy in Budapest, and a few days later, 2 men rammed the Slovak ambassador's car and shouted abuse at him. An EU investigation into the affair is still ongoing.